All right, the recording has begun. Shalom Aleichem Rabotai. Welcome to our, I'm going to say Wednesday, but today's Thursday class of Yalkut Yosef. And we are going to continue and hopefully very soon get to the end. And not just, the goal is not just getting to the end, but also controlling and remembering the halachot of Netilat Yadayim. What's the proper way to wash our hands in the morning? What happens if we wake up in the middle of the night, we want to eat, etc. So we're continuing on that note. Now he's going to regard what happens when a person goes to sleep. We explained that spiritually the neshama goes, and therefore when it comes back in the morning, we say, Elokai neshama shenatata bi Hashem, the soul that you are giving in me is pure, etc. Why? Because it's as if the neshama left us. That spiritual act of when the neshama leaves you and comes back is wherever there's purity, when the purity leaves, there's impurity. So that's why we have to do the netilat yadayim, etc. So now he's going to say, what happens if I'm sleeping on the bed and underneath my bed, this is very common among soldiers in the army, they put their food under their bed. Happens. So is that a problem? Because you're not allowed to sleep on top of food. Does the food become impure? What do we do with that? So he says like this, Rabu hamatirim ala usrim. They are more poskim that allow to eat that food that was under your bed than the poskim that don't allow. Meaning there's room to be lenient. If you're a soldier, whatever it is, and you put a bunch of food under your bed, you want to sleep, you wake up, mutarim lachem, kosher. It says, vekol sheken, and how much more so if the floor had some sort of tiles on it, right? Minding you, back in the day, the halacha regarded a floor, you're not allowed to put food on the floor and sleep above it, that was actual sand, It's not like today where we have tiles. So that's considered another reason to be lenient. So since it has tiles, he says, even if it's very little value of food, like $1, still don't throw it out. No need to throw it out. There's a lot of room for leniencies. But if it's a floor that doesn't have the tiles on them, that's already, the Chachamim call that Karka Olam, the land of the world, meaning the actual floor of the world. Then only if there's a lot of money being wasted here, let's say, I don't know, it's a gourmet dinner under for some reason, or under the bed or whatever, then okay, then if it has a lot of value, then b'di'avad we will allow it. But to begin with, obviously, it's not the most ideal thing to do. Another topic, what about the food that is in my pockets? Let's say I have a sandwich in my pocket and I go to sleep, I wake up, I want to eat it later. Is that a problem? So he says, same idea here, b'di'avad. B'di'avad means after the action. Before, better you take it out of your pocket. But if you already did it, no problem. You could eat that. And now something very relevant, I think, to all of us. Can anyone think of an example of a case that people are sleeping on top of food? This happens every day in many places around the world. In the planes, there's, in the trunk of the plane, whatever it is, where they put all the food, or hundreds of people are sitting on top. They don't take a nap. They don't go to sleep at night. What happens with the food over there? Obviously, there's food in there. How do we treat it? So he brings, this is the beauty of Yalkut Yosef. He brings, how many I cited before, maybe 8 or 9 different reasons why we can say that food is kosher. So we'll go through them quickly just to see what a posek does. This is Yalkut Yosef, Harav Yitzchak Yosef, the son to the family of Harav Ovadia Yosef. We see the eye of the poskim. How do they find reasons to make life more simple for us? By the way, that's the approach of the family. The approach of the family is just generations. You always have to find a leniency. You have to find a good loophole. Baruch Hashem, in our community, we have Arab Ben Chaim. Also, he believes that that's a mechanism. Why? Because if you're going to be strict on people to an extent that it's hard for them, they're just not going to keep it. Better you find something that they can rely on than be asur, everything, no, and then people go against the words of Chachamim. So why does he allow it? He says, first of all, that compartment of where the food is considered its own area, meaning it's not like you're in the same room. It's like it's a different department. Therefore, that's one reason we shouldn't consider it as if you're sleeping on top of the food. It's different compartments. That's one. 2, he says that we learn that when there's a loss, even if you are sleeping above it, you shouldn't do it to begin with. But b'di'avad, if you already did it, we saw that already, there's a reason to allow it as well. And another thing is that the problem begins only when you're sleeping on a bed. A bed, someone is comfortable, he actually goes to sleep. When you're sleeping on a chair, let's say I'm sitting on a chair like I am right now, and I fall asleep and there's food under me or in my pocket. No one will ever tell you that's a problem. The problem is when you sleep a kshenat keva, a real sleep. Where does a real sleep occur? When you're on a bed. Halachically, that's considered something that requires the netilat yadayim. That's considered something that the neshama left and came back. But when it's just like a quick sleep on the chair, even if it's on the plane for a long time, a chair is not considered something that brings tuma. Unless he mentions it over here, if someone is like, let's say, flying business or whatever, and the chair turns into a complete flat bed, okay, over there, there's room to say that it turned into a bed, but we still have so many other leniencies that he brings in. For example, it has to be a bed that has potential of the mitzvah for a husband and wife to be on, right? That's considered a bed, a place that you could do the mitzvah. A husband and wife can be in a plane on an open, even in business on an opening chair. It's not relevant, so that's not considered a real bed, he says. And also we learned that all the problem is when it's on the ground of the earth, karka olam as we called it. It's another reason. This is not karka olam, it's a floor of a plane. It's completely fine. Another reason, food that is sealed and wrapped, no problem. Only if it's visible food that you slept on top of it, okay, like a loaf of bread, all right. But this is already wrapped. It's not going to be thrown in there under the plane. So obviously when it's wrapped, there's more room to be lenient. Another reason he brings, and he says it's not 100% that the food is exactly under where someone fell asleep. Maybe half of the plane is awake, half of the plane fell asleep, but the food is not located exactly under the person that fell asleep. So how can we know for sure that this food went under all those things? And he says, Shema Yashav Goy, listen to this, beautiful. He says, if a goy fell asleep and there's food under his bed, there's no problem. Because what do we learn? When does the problem begin? We said when we go to sleep, a place that was pure, now the pureness left, so impurity sits. But a goy, there's no impurity because he was never tahor to begin with. That's why, same thing with the cemetery, Ad Mavesrim. When someone goes and passes by a Bet Almin, a cemetery of a goy, there's no tumah over there. We don't have to wash our hands after nothing. It's nothing to us. Why? Because there was no purity to begin with. A Jew, he has the ability to become tahor. He does netilah, etc. His soul comes from a different place, and therefore, once he was pure, when the neshama left him, it left impurity, and that's why he has to wash his hands, etc. So maybe the food was under a goy. If it was under a goy anyway, if he fell asleep, there's no problem. Beautiful. So many different reasons why to make everything mutar allowed. Or he says, maybe a baby is exactly where the food was. And a baby is not considered a grown-up for this matter. It's not a problem if a baby sleeps on food. So that's another reason to be lenient. And he brings here a Torat Chaim. All right. It's considered a compartment. He says, like, the only problem of Tumah coming down is if you are in the same level, but since you're elevated above it, meaning even if you're on the same floor, maybe there could be potential for problem if it's under you. But this is not even on your floor. It's a completely different floor. Forget compartment. It's a different floor. All right. But what do we see from here? This is the beauty of the poskim. Let's try to find a way to make the food allowed. Let's not give a hard time to the people, because what? People are going to throw out the food. Now, let's say I would throw out the food. Okay, I'm a tzaddik. I'm going on the ways of Hashem. If a rabbi tells me no. But what about El Al? Or everybody over there is going to throw out the food because somebody fell asleep. We know for a fact it's not going to happen. So now, if you don't allow this food, the Chachamim and their power, when they allow something, then even if I want to be strict, but it's allowed for me. If they will say asur, then the food is going to be served and everybody's going to go over a isur. It's a reality. That's why it's important to find the leniencies in our generation. Back in the day, people kept Torah and mitzvot. You know what I mean? Today, we have difficulties. Not everybody will listen even if you tell them. So, Baruch Hashem. Now he mentions here what we mentioned before. How come with a goy it wouldn't be a problem? He writes in the note on the bottom. He brings a posek called Pri Megadim. That's the name of his book. And the Pri Megadim writes, Rak b'Yisrael shayach tumah v'tara. Only with a Jew from Israel there's a matter of purity and impurity. Shelefi chibatam tumatam. That because Hashem loves them, since He loved us, He gave us a special neshama. That neshama has the ability to become pure. Then when He removes it, then there's impurity. I think the Zohar HaKadosh brings, maybe, I don't want to say stam, but I heard this example that is brought. If you take a huge, let's say, bucket, empty, and you put it outside, you don't see any flies flying around it or mosquitoes or whatever it is. But you take a bucket and you fill it with honey, and you say, okay, let me pour out all the honey. And you go and you pour out all the honey, and you put it outside. There's no more honey in there. But you put it outside, the insects come, but why? It's not there anymore. Since it used to be, it left some sort of impression, and that's why they come. Same thing with the neshama. The neshama, it's pure, so it leaves us, there's an impression of impurity, as if it's felt that it was there and it's not there anymore, and therefore, people sick like this. All right, let's continue. What happens? This was sleep during the night. That's when the neshama goes up and come back down. What about sleeping during the day? People that work in night shifts. So they come home 10 o'clock in the morning and they go to sleep till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. What would they do over there? So he says, לכתחילה לא ייגע באוכלים ומשקים קודם שיטול ידיים. So do not touch the foods until you do נטילה לכתחילה, right? אבל בדיעבד, but if you already did it, no problem. You could eat that food a little bit like we discussed the bakeries. Remember, we said you go to a bakery. There's people there. They don't necessarily know halacha. Everybody does netilah, but they're arranging all the bread. So all the breads now are going to become asur. So no, lekatchila, it's better, but if it's been touched, it's fine. We're not going to make the food not kosher, not legit to eat. מותר להריח טבק קודם נטילת ידיים שחרית. I don't know if you know what tabak is. Maybe you guys will tell me what it's called in English, but on fast days, they hand out this tobacco, maybe. They let people sniff it to wake up a little bit. I mean, some people do it, right? So it's a common thing, he says. Am I allowed to do... Sorry?
I think it's called snuff.
Snuff? All right. Snuff. Snuff because masnifim it. La sniff is to go like that in Hebrew. Or maybe. Anyway, להריח טבק קודם שחרית. I didn't pray shacharit yet. Am I allowed to take a sniff in? So of course it's not considered like a food, you're allowed to take it in you. As well as a cigarette. Obviously, Rabbi Ovadia and his son, they don't recommend smoking, but if someone is a smoker, there's no problem of I ate before tefillah. Yeah, cigarette is not considered like food. וכל שכן שמותר באלו קודם שנטל ידיו מבית הכיסא. So he says, even before נטילת ידיים, right? Because if it was like food, then when you touch it without washing your hands, it's a problem to eat it. No, cigarette is not food, and therefore it's allowed. And וכל שכן שמותר באלו קודם שנטל ידיים מבית הכיסא ובית הקברות. And also for להבדיל, as we said before, for our cemetery. When we leave the cemetery, when someone leaves the cemetery, he does netilat yadayim, right? Because he went around impurity. But even if you left and you didn't do the netilah and you touched foods, no problem. B'diavad, you don't need to be strict on that. ואף על פי שמותר לעשן בבית הקברות, he says, and even though it's allowed to smoke in a cemetery, why is he mentioning this? Because you should know, food, eating, you're not supposed to eat in a cemetery. If you have sometimes people have like this saul or whatever it is, and they all go to the cemetery. And I remember Aleh Shalom, my grandmother, she would, make sandwiches for the grandkids. She wanted us to all come and feel good, but we never eat next to the graves. There's an entrance, there's an area in the entrance. Over there, you could sit, you could eat, but next to the graves, we don't eat because it's like making them uncomfortable. I'm saying berachot, I'm saying netilah, I'm saying amotzi. They can't do the mitzvot. They're already not here anymore. So we don't eat in the cemetery. He says, smoking would be allowed. He says, but even though smoking is allowed in the cemetery, because really the evil spirit does not dwell on foods in the cemetery, but the Rama is the posek of the Ashkenazim. The Sephardim had a Shulchan Aruch, the Ashkenazim had the Rama, Rabbi Moshe Isserlish. The Rama already said that you shouldn't eat or drink in the cemetery. Mishum kalot rosh, don't get too comfortable over there. This is a place of seriousness. Do not eat and drink over there, right? And he says what we said before. And those that it is their custom to bring food or drinks to the cemetery, and they let people eat it with a bracha. So why are they doing berachot? They want to give the metim nachad. They say, if I say a beracha, it's for ilu neshama of the metim. So I'm trying to do something good. So okay, you want to do good, but it's the right thing to do is to eat that at the entrance of the cemetery and not within 4 amot, which is about 2 meters, 6-7 feet next to a grave. Don't do it next to a grave, but take a few steps away. All right. Let those halachot be only halacha shelo lemaaseh. We should only go to happy places. Someone woke up in the morning, and now he touches his clothes before he does netilat yadayim. He says, of course, no problem. As we mentioned, the custom of Rav Ovadia was to only do netilat yadayim when he goes downstairs or to the kitchen, whatever it was. But first of all, he would go to the restroom, he would get dressed. This is what his children, his chatan, is teaching us. That's the right way to go. ולכן מותר ללבוש בגדיו קודם שנטל ידיים שחרית. again, maybe I'll be more careful with my words. I'm saying it's the right way to go. The ideal way to go is to put a picture of an atlan next to your bed and do netilah right when you wake up. There's a problem with that because a lot of the times you have to go to the bathroom when you wake up. So if you have to go to the bathroom, you can't do netilat yadayim and say bracha. And that's why the suggestion of Rabbi Ovadia, and I'm sure most people, they wake up in the morning, they need to go to the bathroom. The right thing to do is first to go bathroom. If you want to get dressed, you could. If you don't want to get dressed and just go with your robe, whatever it's for, as long as you're covered, you go and do the netilat yadayim. All right. He says, and how much more so there's room to be lenient if I went to sleep after midnight. What do we learn from here? It's as if to say that when someone is asleep before midnight, that's the time of dinim, they call it, the time of judgment, between sunset and midnight is like a harsh time. So when someone is asleep in that time, it's like the peak of tumah, the peak of impurity went on him, and therefore we say, woke up, do netilat yadayim, etc. It says, but if I went to sleep after midnight, so the ruach ra'ah, that evil spirit, or whatever you want to call it, that dwells on our fingers when we wake up in the morning, is not as powerful as if it was if we went to sleep earlier. And therefore, even more so, how much you should be lenient about touching your clothing and other things and putting them on before you do the netilat yadayim. And it says here what we said, and you're also allowed to go to the bathroom before, even if you slept before midnight, and you're allowed to put on your clothing, and only then you should wash your hands and say a bracha. That's what the Rav used to do. He says, but there are some that are Hasidim, that they go according to the Kabbalah. And those that go according to the Kabbalah, he mentions what we said here, they put next to their bed, liad mitatam, he says, a vessel with water and a bowl, and they wash their hands right away, and only then do they dress up, etc., etc. And he says, and then only then they get dressed. However, he didn't say that they say a bracha, if you notice. He just says they wash their hands, because at the end of the day, there is impurity on your hands. So those that want to become chasidim, but they have to go to the bathroom, and they can't say a bracha, they first of all do the netilah, not to say a bracha, just to remove that impurity. They removed it. Now put on your clothes, go to the restroom, finished with everything, put on your shoes or whatever it is. Your hands are now dirty, or even if you went into a bathroom where there's a toilet, anyway, you're required to wash your hands again. So now they can do another netilah and they could say the beracha. Don't say, oh, I already did one in the morning. How could I say the beracha now? That netilah was to remove the impurity. But since that netilah, your hands got dirty again. You put on your shoes, you went to the bathroom. Therefore, you do another netilah, and that netilah should come with the beracha. Now, again, this is a machmirim. These are the chasidim, those that want to cover the side of the Kabbalah as well. The Kabbalah says, keep it next to your bed. But I'm telling you, halacha lemaseh, what Rav Ovadia himself used to do, they testify, he would do everything that he needed to do, and only then he did his netilat yadayim. All right. And he mentions here that if you are going to be that person that leaves a cup of water, don't leave that cup of water under your bed, because it's considered like food where when you sleep on it and the tumah dwells on it, right? Now he says, and if someone feels like he really needs to go to the bathroom, he is not allowed to be strict on himself and say, wait, let me first do the netilah so my hands are pure, then go to the bed. No, every second that you need to go to the bathroom, talking about someone that really needs to go, that he can't hold it for another hour, let's say. 72 minutes is the criteria. If he can't hold it for 72 minutes, he really needs to go, he's about to explode. No, let me do netilah. That's a bad thing you did. Why? Because there's the isur of bal teshaketzu. You're not allowed to make your body impure. Any second that you need to go to the bathroom and you're holding it in, it's mamash asur. It's a problem from the Torah to do that. You have to go to the bathroom. Do not hold it. The only times I think we saw in the past that there's room for leniencies, if let's say you are in a shiur Torah in public and you don't want to be embarrassed to leave, or it's a kirat megillah or something that you're going to miss it, when it has to do with a certain mitzvah, it's mitzvah de rabim, okay, then we're lenient. But other than that, you got to go. You should go right away. So that you won't transgress the mitzvah of bal teshaketzu, of making your body impure. But he says, but be careful, since your hands are impure, and we cannot ignore that fact. If I'm going to touch certain, they call it the openings of the body, right? We have openings in our ears, in our nose, in our mouth, and other openings on the bottom of the body. So those are areas that you should not touch. Even though we allow you to go to the bathroom and only after do the netilah, but we can't ignore the fact that the hands do have impurity, and it's very bad for those hands to touch areas that have an opening to the body. So don't touch any openings, right? That's what you should be careful with. He says, but if someone wants to be strict upon himself and do the netilah before he goes to the bathroom, you are allowed to. But minadin, you're allowed to also go to the bathroom first. As we mentioned, the only way that you're allowed to be strict upon yourself to do the netilah with a beracha is if you don't need to go to the bathroom. But if you need to go to the bathroom, you cannot make the beracha. You could still be strict by just doing the netilah, so that now your hands are clean in a spiritual way, and then you could touch wherever you want comfortably. That's not a requirement, that's just according to Kabbalah. Okay, let's summarize a little bit because it got a little bit complicated, but the idea is when we go to sleep, certain impurity, ruach ra'ah, comes onto our hands. Wake up in the morning, we have to remove that. The question is, when am I obligated to remove it? The answer is better sooner than later. However, if someone needs to go to the bathroom, he cannot say a bracha al netilat yadayim. Therefore, the recommendation is, as we said, go to the bathroom, do the netilat yadayim, or if you want to be strict upon yourself, do a netilah next to your bed without a bracha, just so your hands are completely pure. Then do whatever you need to do, put on your shoes, then do another netilah with a bracha. That's the order of the things. Now, what's the din of this water? Let's say I do have that bucket and I poured it into a cup, I did netilat yadayim, and now that water that is carrying the impurity of my hands is right here. Am I allowed to learn Torah next to it? Am I allowed to say berachot next to it? What's the status of this water? That's what he's going to discuss. So he says, Mutar lilmod velevarech. You're allowed to learn and you're allowed to say berachot against this water of netilat yadayim. Even if it's right before you, and even if it doesn't have a cover, it's revealed. Still, you are allowed to. But it's a chassidut not to. You want to be a chassid, either cover it or remove it a few feet away from you. But if you have no choice, if you're in a small room and it's there and you have nowhere to pour it, whatever, no problem. Don't say, I'm not going to learn, I'm not going to say berachot. I have to share a story. I heard a nice story from Jan El-Yassi. He said it in the morning in one of the Batei Knesset, the story about Rabbi Zusha and Rabbi Elimelech Milizhensk. They were two brothers, European brothers, that at a certain point they were thrown into prison, big tzaddikim. Back then they didn't need a reason to throw someone into prison. They put him in prison, and there was a bucket in the center of that prison room where people have to go in that bucket. So obviously it was filthy and smelly, and now Rabbi Elimelech Milizhensk starts crying. So his brother says, why are you crying? He says, I'm crying because I can't do Torah, I can't keep mitzvot, there's impurity right here, there's nowhere to put it, I can't do netilat yadayim, I can't do anything, I feel terrible. So what did he answer back? He says, my brother, don't feel terrible. The same God that commanded you to do netilat yadayim is the same God that commanded you to not do it when there's impurity. So you're still doing the will of God by not doing netilat yadayim. And a lot of times we forget, we want to do the mitzvah. The mindset of a Jew, naturally just, can I do the mitzvah or not? It's important. But higher level is, what does Hashem want me to do right now? Because a lot of times a person can say, I want to go to mitzvah, I want to go to a shiur Torah, and by going to a shiur Torah, he's going over so many mitzvot of, not helping his parents or disrespecting, giving trouble to his wife, and he's removing stuff that are necessity for him to do because he wants to go do a mitzvah. It's important to do the mitzvot, but the question a person has to ask him all the time, what does Hashem expect me to do right now? Not what I want to do. And since Hashem did not want him to do netilah in that place, he was keeping the will of Hashem. Just in reference of washing your hands with a bucket that's impure. So now we're talking about the water of the netilat yadayim that is standing in front of them. It says, if you want to be a chassid, remove it and say berachot and learn. But if you have nowhere to put it, don't prevent yourself from that. You're allowed to keep on learning. This is the water of netilah, right? As opposed to what Rabbi Zusha and Rabbi Elimelech had in prison, which was actually, remains of people and whatnot. That's a different story already. He says, and let me offer you a solution. If you take 3 ounces of water, that's called the revi'it, like the cup of Pesach Lavdi, and you pour that into the impure water, then there's no question at all that you're allowed to say berachot and learn Torah, even lekatchila. You don't have to remove it at all. Where does he learn this? He learns this from someone that has to go to do number 1. And the Gemara says, number 1 is before you. What am I going to do? I can't say berachot, no problem. Take 3 ounces of water, pour into that bucket of the number 1, That's it. Now you're allowed to do everything. So he says, if on number 1, the 3 ounces made it pure enough so that I could learn Torah and say berachot, how much more so that just water that I washed my hands with, and therefore that's a good solution as well. Okay, so as we said before. ואינו למידת חסידות, בוודאי שעל ידי ביטול רבית מים מותר לקרוא בפנים דם, even if you want to be a chassid, you want to say, no, I want to be strict. Okay, you want to be strict? Once you pour those 3 ounces into the thing, that's the most strictness. There's no need to be more chassid than that. That's already the highest level of chasidut. Mutarim. That would be allowed. Yeah, we got like 4 more minutes. Let's try to get another halacha here. So what are the things that require washing our hands with water? One is hakam mimitato, someone that got out of his bed. 2, hayotze mibet hakiseh ve'hamechat, someone that leaves the bathroom or that leaves the shower, and he says, and took a shower there, right? Then you should wash your hands. But he says if you just walk into a shower room and walk out, you don't need to wash your hands. As opposed to a toilet, a bathroom. A room that has a toilet, when we leave it, we didn't do anything. We just came to take soap and left. Now our hands are impure. We don't have to do netilah with a cup, but we have to turn on the faucet and do this 6 times because of the impurity that dwells in a place that is a bathroom. By the way, there's a controversy around this. Rav Ovadia and obviously his son hold that there's impurity just because it's a bathroom. But a Chacham ben Zion Abba Shaul, which was in the same generation as Rav Ovadia, he held no. The bathrooms back then used to be very dirty, so that's why it's impure. But today, the remains aren't there anymore. It's been flushed away, so the room is not impure. So if I just come in to take soap, I don't need to wash my hands. It's a machloket between them. So we use Chacham ben Zion Abba Shaul's lenient opinion. We rely on it, let's say, when we're in a plane. Someone goes into the bathroom, the same place where the bathroom is, the washing hand stand is. You have nowhere to wash your hands outside, so you will rely on that. But if you don't have to rely on that, anytime you go into the bathroom, where there is a toilet there, you have to wash your hands. But if there's just a shower, you do not have to wash your hands. So we had the bathroom and shower. We had someone that woke up from his bed. Hanotel tzipornav, someone that cut his nails. You cut your nails, my hands are completely clean. Once you cut your nails, you have to wash your hands 3 on each side. Again, none of these require the cup. The only time it requires the cup is before we eat bread. But these are cases where do the 6-pack. And we said in the morning, if you do it with a cup, it's even better because with the cup, you're allowed to say a baracha. V'acholetz min alav, someone that touched his shoes, took off his shoes. If I just want to tie my shoelaces, let's say I'm in the Bet Knesset and I see my shoelace opened up. You're allowed to tie your shoelace as long as you don't touch the shoe. If you're able to do that without touching the shoe, no problem. You don't have to go out and wash your hands. But if you touched your shoe, you have to go out and wash your hands. V'anogea beraglav, if you touched your legs, not with the pants on. It means that let's say you have shorts and you're touching under in a place that's like your legs areas that usually are covered, then obviously you should wash your hands after that. Someone is scratching his scalp, or someone that's walking in a cemetery between the dead within proximity of Arba Amot, close enough. Or if someone touched someone that is dead, lo alenu. All right, someone that did the mitzvah with his wife. Kina is lice that in someone's head. If you touched one of those, or if you touched anywhere in your body that is usually covered, all those require you to wash your hands. It says in parentheses, not with a vessel, not with a natlan, just enough to do the, as we call it, the 6-pack, the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And if someone did one of these things, and after that he did not wash his hand, if he's a Talmid Chacham, a serious Torah learner, Talmudo mishtakeach, he will forget his learning. Meaning this impurity, he says, is not just a mitzvah to do, but there's an actual repercussion to not doing it. It takes away the memory of the learning. That's a beautiful beauty of our Judaism. The person has to be pure. It's not just a physical thing. It's mentally. The pureness affects your mind, affects your memory. So I'm not a Talmid Chacham. I'm not going to forget my Torah. Let me not do it. He says, no. And if you're not a Talmid Chacham, it makes you lose your sense. You don't have to remember the books anymore. Just your normal sense that a person has, you also lose that by not keeping your hands pure. All right, gentlemen, Hashem should help us to keep our hands pure at all times. want to ask you a question, but let me stop the recording and then I'll ask you a question. Jesus, one moment. So